I felt their eyes on me the moment I stepped into the vineyard's tasting room, the late afternoon light catching the silver in my hair just right. At 69, I'd learned to appreciate the power of presence, and tonight I was radiating it. Louis, 70 but carrying himself like a man 20 years younger, had been watching me from across the room all evening. His gaze was steady, appreciative, the kind that made my skin warm beneath my silk blouse. Joyce, my dear friend of 30 years, nudged me with her elbow. "That man hasn't taken his eyes off you," she whispered, her voice tinged with admiration. I smiled, feeling the familiar flutter of anticipation in my chest. "I know," I murmured back, taking a slow sip of the Cabernet we'd been sampling. If you're enjoying this already, take a quick second to like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow and means more than you know. The vineyard was perfect for this kind of evening. Soft lighting, the scent of aged oak barrels, and wine that loosened tongues and lowered inhibitions. I'd dressed deliberately, a flowing dress that hugged my curves in all the right places, jewelry that caught the light when I moved. Age had been kind to me, and I wasn't shy about showing it. Louis approached during the break between tastings, his confidence evident in every step. "Rose," he said, his voice carrying that slight rasp that comes with age but loses none of its appeal. I was hoping we might continue this conversation somewhere more private. Joyce squeezed my arm encouragingly before melting back into the crowd, leaving us alone. "What kind of conversation did you have in mind?" I asked, letting my fingers trail along the stem of my wine glass. His eyes followed the movement, then met mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "The kind that pairs well with a very special vintage I keep in my private collection," he said. "My cottage is just beyond the main building." I set down my glass and stepped closer, close enough to catch the warm scent of his cologne mixed with the earthy richness of the wine. "Lead the way." The walk to his cottage felt charged with possibility. The evening air was cool against my skin, but his presence beside me radiated warmth. He kept one hand lightly on my lower back as we walked, a gentle guidance that sent pleasant shivers through me. "You're quite captivating," he said softly as we reached his door. "I've been thinking about you all evening." I turned to face him, letting my body language speak before my words. "Have you now?" He stepped closer, close enough that I could feel his breath against my cheek. "Very much so." Inside his cottage, the atmosphere shifted immediately. Soft lighting, comfortable furniture, and the intimate setting of a man who knew how to create an environment for connection. He poured 2 glasses of wine from a bottle I didn't recognize, something rich and deep that seemed to glow in the amber light. "This is from my personal reserve," he said, handing me the glass. "I don't share it with just anyone." Our fingers brushed as I took the wine, a simple touch that sent electricity up my arm. "I'm flattered," I said, taking a sip. The wine was exquisite, complex and warming. We settled onto his couch, sitting close enough that our knees touched. The conversation flowed as smoothly as the wine, moving from travel stories to life experiences. But underneath it all was a current of attraction that grew stronger with each shared glance. "You have the most beautiful smile," he said suddenly, his eyes focused on my lips. "It lights up your entire face." Heat spread through my chest at the compliment. "You're quite the charmer," I replied, leaning slightly closer. "But I suspect you already know that." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining in a gesture that felt both natural and electric. "Rose," he said, his voice softer now, more intimate. "I hope I'm not misreading this, but I find myself very drawn to you." I squeezed his hand gently. "You're not misreading anything," I assured him. "The feeling is entirely mutual." The space between us seemed to shrink, the air growing thick. With anticipation, his free hand reached up to brush a strand of hair from my face, the touch so gentle it made me shiver. "May I?" he asked, his eyes searching mine for permission. Instead of answering with words, I leaned into him, closing the distance between us. Our lips met in a kiss that was tender at first, exploratory, then deeper as we both surrendered to the moment. His hands found my waist, drawing me closer, and I melted into his embrace. The kiss tasted of wine and promise, of 2 people who had lived full lives and weren't afraid to reach for more. When we finally broke apart, we were both breathing heavily. "That was—" I started, but he silenced me with another kiss, this one more urgent, more demanding. His hands moved to the buttons of my blouse, and I didn't stop him. Instead, I reached for his shirt, my fingers working to remove the barriers between us. The fabric fell away piece by piece, revealing skin that carried the stories of a life well lived. He was still strong, still vital, and the way he looked at me made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world. "You're magnificent," he whispered against my neck, his lips trailing along my skin in a way that made me gasp softly. His hands explored with reverent care, mapping the curves of my body with touches that were both gentle and possessive. I arched into his touch, my own hands roaming across his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat beneath my palms. "Louis," I breathed, his name a prayer on my lips. He lifted me effortlessly, carrying me to his bedroom where moonlight streamed through gauze curtains, casting everything in a silver glow. He laid me down gently on the bed, his eyes drinking in the sight of me. "Beautiful," he murmured, joining me on the soft sheets. His mouth found mine again, then traveled lower, tracing a path along my throat, my collarbone, lower still. Each kiss sent waves of warmth through me, building a heat that threatened to consume us both. His attention focused on my silhouette, his lips pressing gentle kisses against my skin that made me gasp and arch beneath him. The sensation was electric, every nerve ending alive with pleasure. My hands tangled in his hair, holding him close as he lavished attention on my frame, taking his time, savoring every moment. "Don't stop," I whispered, my voice barely audible, in the quiet room. He didn't. His movements were deliberate, practiced, the actions of a man who understood how to bring pleasure. I felt myself spiraling upward, caught in sensation that built and built until I couldn't think, could only feel. My body responded to every touch, every caress, moving with him in a rhythm as old as time itself. "Yes," I breathed, encouraging. Him, guiding him, lost in the shared warmth between us. The tension coiled tighter and tighter until finally, it snapped. Waves of sensation crashed over me, leaving me trembling and breathless in his arms. He held me close as I recovered, his own breathing heavy with desire. "My turn," I whispered, pushing him gently onto his back. I explored his body with the same reverent care he had shown me, my lips and hands mapping every inch of him, drawing sounds of pleasure from deep in his throat. When I took him in my mouth, he groaned softly, his hands finding my hair, not guiding, but simply holding, letting me set the pace. I took my time, savoring the taste of him, the way his body responded to my attention. His reactions fueled my own desire, the knowledge that I could affect him this way, sending heat pooling low in my belly. "Rose," he gasped, his voice strained with need. I moved up his body slowly, deliberately, until I was straddling him. Our eyes locked as I positioned myself above him, the moment heavy with anticipation. When I sank down onto him, we both cried out softly, the sensation overwhelming. For a moment, we simply held still, adjusting to the feeling of being joined, connected, so intimately. Then I began to move, finding a rhythm that drew gasps from both of us. His hands gripped my hips, helping to guide my movements, but letting me maintain control. I rode him slowly at first, savoring every sensation, then faster as the pleasure built. The moonlight painted our bodies silver as we moved together, lost in each other, in the heat and friction and overwhelming sensation of being alive and vital and connected. "You feel incredible," he managed to say between ragged breaths. I leaned down to kiss him, never breaking the rhythm of our bodies. "So do you," I whispered against his lips. The tension was building again, that familiar coiling deep inside that promised release. I could feel him growing more urgent beneath me, his movements becoming less controlled, more desperate. When my peak hit this time, it was even more intense than before. I threw my head back, crying out softly as waves of pleasure washed over me. The sight and sound of my climax triggered his own, and he pulled me down against him as he reached his peak, his body shuddering beneath mine. We collapsed together, breathing heavily, skin damp with exertion, utterly satisfied. We lay entwined for long minutes, neither wanting to break the spell of intimacy we'd created. His fingers traced lazy patterns on my back as my head rested on his chest, listening to the gradual slowing of his heartbeat. "That was extraordinary," he said softly, pressing a kiss to the top of my head. "Absolutely extraordinary." I smiled against his skin. "It certainly was," I agreed. Eventually, we made our way back to the living room, wrapped in his silk robe, sharing another glass of wine as we sat curled together on the couch. The night air drifted through an open window, cooling our heated skin. "I should probably get back soon," I said reluctantly. "Joyce will be wondering where I disappeared to." He tightened his arms around me. "Will I see you again?" he asked, and there was vulnerability in his voice that touched me. "I'd like that very much," I said, tilting my head up to look at him. "I'm staying in town for another week." His smile was radiant. "Then perhaps tomorrow evening? I know a lovely restaurant with an even more private dining room." I laughed, softly. "You're incorrigible," I said, but I was already nodding yes. When I finally returned to the main tasting room to collect Joyce, she took one look at me and grinned knowingly. Well, she said, linking her arm through mine as we walked to the car. "Someone looks thoroughly satisfied." I could feel the blush spreading across my cheeks, but I didn't deny it. It was a very educational evening, I said primly, which only made her laugh harder. Educational, she says. Joyce chuckled as we drove back to our hotel. Rose, darling, you're practically glowing. I haven't seen you look this happy in years. She was right. I did feel different. Alive, awakened, reminded of pleasures I'd thought were behind me. Age is just a number, Joyce, I said, rolling down the window to let the night air stream through my hair. Tonight proved that. Back at the hotel, as I prepared for bed, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Joyce was right. I was glowing. My skin looked radiant, my eyes bright with satisfaction and anticipation. I'd forgotten how powerful it felt, to be desired, to feel sexy and alive in my own skin. Lewis had reminded me that passion doesn't diminish with age. It simply becomes more refined, more appreciative of quality over quantity. I slipped into bed with a smile on my lips, already anticipating tomorrow evening. The wine tasting had been meant to be a simple cultural experience, a way to spend an evening with a dear friend. Instead, it had become something much more significant, a reminder that life still held surprises, still offered opportunities for connection and pleasure and joy. The next morning, Joyce and I met for breakfast on the hotel's terrace. She was practically vibrating with curiosity, but she waited until we'd ordered before pouncing. "All right, I've been patient long enough," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "I want details, not intimate details," she added quickly, "but I want to know how you're feeling. You seem transformed." I took a sip of my coffee, considering my words. "I feel awakened," I said finally, like I'd been sleepwalking and suddenly woke up. "He must be quite something," Joyce observed. "I watched you two together before you disappeared. The chemistry was unmistakable." I smiled, remembering the way Lewis had looked at me, the way his touch had ignited fires I'd thought were extinguished. "He is," I agreed, "charming, attentive, passionate. He made me feel like the most beautiful woman in the world." Joyce reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "Because you are beautiful, Rose. You always have been. You just needed someone to remind you." As we finished breakfast, my phone buzzed with a text message. Lewis, already confirming our dinner plans for the evening. My pulse quickened at the sight of his name on my screen, and I found myself smiling like a teenager with her first crush. "That him?" Joyce asked, noting my expression. I nodded, typing back a quick confirmation. "We're having dinner tonight." Joyce grinned. "Good for you. It's about time you had some fun." The day passed in a pleasant haze of anticipation. Joyce and I explored the local shops, had lunch at a charming cafe, visited a gallery featuring local artists. But underneath it all, I was thinking about the evening ahead, about Lewis, about the way he'd made me feel so alive and desired. I chose my outfit carefully, a dress that flattered my figure, jewelry that caught the light, perfume that would linger on my skin. When Lewis picked me up at the hotel that evening, the look in his eyes told me I'd chosen well. "You look stunning," he said, taking my hand and bringing it to his lips for a kiss that sent shivers up my arm. "Thank you," I replied, feeling beautiful under his appreciative gaze. The restaurant he'd chosen was intimate and elegant, tucked away in a historic building with low lighting and secluded booths perfect for private conversation. Over dinner, we talked more about our lives, our experiences, our hopes for the future. I learned that he was a widower, like me, that he'd discovered winemaking after retiring from a successful business career, that he lived alone, but was surrounded by friends and community. "I wasn't looking for romance," he admitted over dessert. I'd convinced myself that chapter of my life was closed. But then I saw you yesterday evening and something just clicked. I understood completely. "I felt it too," I said. That immediate recognition, like we'd been waiting for each other without realizing it. He reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "Come home with me tonight," he said softly. "Stay with me." The invitation hung in the air between us, loaded with promise. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," I said simply. This time there was no urgency, no frantic removal of clothing. We took our time, savoring each moment, each touch, each kiss. He undressed me slowly in the soft lamplight of his bedroom, his hands reverent on my skin. "So beautiful," he murmured, and I believed him. In his eyes, in his touch, I saw myself as he saw me, not as an aging woman past her prime, but as a vibrant, sensual being worthy of desire and pleasure. When he laid me back on his bed and began to worship my body with his mouth and hands, I surrendered completely to the sensation. His lips traced every curve, his tongue explored every sensitive spot, building pleasure slowly and deliberately until I was trembling with need. "Please," I whispered, and he smiled against my skin before giving me what I craved. This time when We came together. It was with a deeper understanding, a greater intimacy. We moved together like dancers who'd been partnered for years, anticipating each other's needs, responding to each other's rhythms. The pleasure built slowly, inexorably, until we were both crying out in shared climax, bodies intertwined, hearts racing in unison. Afterward, we lay talking softly in the darkness, sharing stories and dreams, planning future meetings, exploring this unexpected connection that had bloomed between us. I never expected this, I confessed, my head on his shoulder. At my age, I thought romance was behind me. He turned to face me, his hand cupping my cheek. Age is irrelevant when it comes to connection, he said. What we have transcends numbers. It's about two souls recognizing each other. I spent the night in his arms, waking to soft kisses and gentle caresses as dawn broke over the vineyard. We made love again in the morning light, slower and sweeter than the night before, a perfect ending to a perfect beginning. As I prepared to return to the hotel to meet Joyce for checkout, Lewis pulled me close one more time. This isn't goodbye, he said firmly. This is just the beginning. Joyce took one look at me when I arrived back at the hotel and burst into delighted laughter. Good heavens, Rose, you look like you've discovered the fountain of youth. And perhaps I had. Not the mythical spring that promised eternal life, but something better. The reminder that as long as we're alive, we're capable of passion, of connection, of joy. Lewis had given me back a part of myself I'd thought was lost forever. Sometimes life surprises us in the most beautiful ways. A simple wine tasting became a night of rediscovered passion, a reminder that desire doesn't diminish with age. It simply becomes more precious, more meaningful. So tell me, if you found yourself at that vineyard, would you have taken that glass of wine from a stranger? Would you have followed where it led? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story stirred something in you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of unexpected passion. Life's too short not to savor every drop. Until next time, keep your heart open to possibility.